Comedy is Tragedy That Happens to Someone Else by Jay Wilburn. The bell rang again. John Mark rattled along his track, and the small wooden doors popped open on their springs to blind his eyes with the bright light of day. He rolled along between the flats of an apartment scene and the small pieces of decorative furniture. Other eyes watched from out of the blur of daylight beyond the fourth wall. By God, he would give anything to be able to sit down on one of those fake couches. Her doors popped open too, and Mary Elizabeth bumped along her track toward him. Her eyes were the brightest unblinking blue, her hair perfect and golden. She wore his favorite blue dress. Some of the paint was chipped away, but in his eyes, it just accented her beauty and made her best features stand out all the more. The pin joints of her elbows bent in a choppy motion and rested upon her lively hips. So this was going to be an argument scene. How many times have I asked you to help clean this house? It was her voice, but not operating under her will. He felt himself falling right into his role for this new script, but not very much different from older plays they had suffered through. He heard himself say, "I don't see you setting the example for me." A couple people out in the crowd that John and Mary were not supposed to notice chuckled. More than a few ladies gave a gasp. Mary gave a convincing huff of her own. "I can't believe you. Maybe you should have married your mother, if that's what you were really looking for." A few more laughs, and one small child piped up with, "Marry your mom, gross." That line brought more laughs. It was a better line, unscripted. John would give up anything to be unscripted. Maybe could use more Cthulhu. That's good. All right. Maybe not anything. Even his life, with all its flaws, was a life lived with Mary Elizabeth. He could imagine no other. His voice went on without him. "I'm just saying that we all have our roles here." "Oh, is that right? So my role is cleaning up your mess, and of course your role is making them." "Well, Mary, that's not exactly what I'm saying." "But it's partially what you're saying." No. The crowd got more into it as John's dialogue fell into the browbeaten husband. A few people grew bored with the melodrama, and they drifted away to wherever people not living in boxes went when the show was over. The ones who remained laughed and clapped as John put on a cardboard apron and broom to start cleaning. John and Mary bowed, and then they rattled along their tracks away from each other as the velvety red curtain closed. The boxes shut behind them, and quiet darkness resumed. Mary's voice came muffled and distant, but he could hear her well enough. This was what he thought of as her real voice. The miserable, browbeaten husband again. I feel like we've done that before. A few times. John raised his voice to be sure she could hear him. "How many shows do you think we'll do today?" He frowned as he said, "It sounded like a big crowd, I'm afraid." Mary gave the smallest sigh, but John still picked up on it. She added, "Well, that can go either way. Busy crowds sometimes want other attractions. Other times they come here because they're tired of waiting in line. What do you think the other attractions are like?" Before she could answer, the curtain opened, the new scenery clicked into place, and the bell rang again. They were off to a new show. The scenery and fake furniture looked torn and disheveled. This was probably an out-of-control dog scene. As soon as they were in place, Mary shrieked, and John's clockwork heart skipped a couple turns in its cogs. She followed that shriek by saying, "It's in the house. Save me. It's in the house, John." "What's in the house?" he demanded with his arms raised. It turned out to be a rubber bat that flew by on a string a few times during the short scene. One of the little kids said, "That one married his mom. He said so." So they were getting repeat customers. It was usually the little kids that convinced their parents to keep running the show. A new show every time, the sign above their destroyed apartment promised as much. John believed there was a similar sign outside with the audience, or how would they know about it when the curtain was closed? This show got a better round of applause as John conveyed into his dark box. "I guess the other attractions can't be that great," Mary said, "if they keep coming to us." "Well, it answers whether this is going to be a busy day or not." As he was still talking, the bell rang again. This time they were in the park. John expected a dog scene for sure this time, but this script was about him begging his wife to let him bring home a squirrel for a pet that he was feeding fake peanuts. "I'm allergic to peanuts," one kid said. The mother explained they weren't real. Nothing here is, John said out loud. Mary went on with her dialogue that he had interrupted. John's line didn't feel scripted, and it scared him. Mary finished talking, but John said nothing. No line came up, even though he knew it in his clockwork heart that he should be saying something. Was he talking to me? The kid asked. Mom didn't answer. A few people mumbled about the attraction being broken. Mary spoke again. I said no, John. She was answering a line he had failed to give. John finally jumped in suddenly with what he knew was the second half of a line he hadn't started. But if you say so, I guess I'll have to go along, although I think Chippy might miss me. The squirrel character jumped up and stole the fake bag of fake peanuts. I think you'll only miss your nuts, Mary said. There was a lot of laughter that John guessed was not related to the actual script. He gave a short line he barely attended to, and Mary said, "You're a silly man, but I love you." The crowd awed at that, and then the kids groaned as Mary and John leaned in to kiss each other to finish this play. As they did, Mary whispered in John's ear, "I really do love you." His clockwork heart sped up, and he felt shivers all over his middle body that he couldn't explain. As the applause died outside and the curtain closed, Mary called out to him before their doors even closed. "What happened out there?" He took a moment, but then answered, "I don't know. You skipped a couple lines." "I know." "You answered one of the kids off script," she said. She sounded upset and suspicious. John didn't understand why. He was just scared. "You did, didn't you?" "I did, but I don't know how. I didn't mean to." The bell rang and they were off again. Back in the apartment, the dog was finally here and started jumping around the furniture, barking and howling as the kids in the blurry sunlight started laughing. "That dog," Mary began but didn't finish. The dog got quieter during the stretch that was supposed to be the rest of her line. Her beautiful eyes got wider, and John wanted to reach out to hold her. His arms actually raised, and he did hold her, all on his own. The dog got louder again for a couple seconds, then it quieted down. This was John's line, but nothing came to him. He finally said on his own, "What about the dog?" Mary shrugged. She actually shrugged. "I don't know. What about him?" The dog got louder. A few people gave uncomfortable laughs. The dog got quiet, whimpered, and sat on the couch. Mary and John just watched it. It howled again, startling them both. Then they actually startled. The dog got on the floor and whimpered. Another pause, and then the dog panted and wagged its metal tail with a series of little clicks. John and Mary turned away from each other and rattled back to their boxes. An older man spoke out as the curtain closed. "I don't get that. Was that some kind of experimental theater?" A few people laughed. Others muttered in agreement. "What the hell is happening?" Mary called. He had never heard her curse. "I don't know. I think we're off script." "What does that mean?" "I don't know. I wish I did." They rolled out for two more plays. One was at the beach, and the other appeared to be an office where John crouched behind the desk. "What are we supposed to do?" Mary asked. "Why are you asking me?" one man called out. "Give our money back, that's what," another man said. This got laughs, but John was far from a laughing mood. "We'll talk about it after the curtain closes." "What did he say?" "I don't know. Sounds like he was whispering." "The machine is breaking. This damn thing has been around since I was a kid." "Don't cuss in front of my children. Just settle down." The curtain closed, and John rumbled along his track. Something popped and then snapped behind him. He turned his head. He was actually able to turn his head. Mary was still in place. "What's wrong, Mary? Are you broken?" He wanted to go back to her, but he had no control over that. Another pop and a small spring ejected from her track. Mary started rolling forward with a terrible racket from inside the floor under them. She continued on and caught up with John. "What are you doing?" "Going off script," she answered. Mary barely made it through the doors before they closed behind both of them. "Mary, I'm here," she whispered. She was so close. He started reaching for her. "How did you do it?" "It's so dark in here. Is it always this dark?" "Yeah, I thought your box was just like this." "I get a little light through a crack in the wood. It's darker at night, but there are lights that go on outside at night. Bugs are attracted to those lights and dance around them all night." John didn't understand all the words, but he answered, "Maybe we should go to your place." He found her finally, and they held one another. "I'm happy here with you," she said. The bell rang again. "This should be interesting," he said as he started clicking along his track, but she wouldn't let go. "Try to stay." He did, and a terrible crashing and grinding followed. The doors popped open, letting in light, but they did not exit. They held on silently as the crowd grumbled and booed. A couple kids started crying, and John felt bad about that. After a minute, that seemed much longer. The curtains closed, but the doors to the box stayed open. "See," she said, "this is much nicer than my place." They talked and held each other and sometimes kissed. There was no script for this, and John had never been happier. No more shows followed that day. As nighttime approached, the curtains opened and the front wall swung out. The boxes were removed, and a giant man, not made of metal, stared down at them. He got under the floor and banged around for a while. "I'm scared," she said. "It'll be okay if we stay together," John answered. The giant rose into view again. He grabbed Mary and pulled her off the track. John held on to her, but he was no match for the giant's strength. She slumped as he lifted her away. John wanted to scream at him and to curse him, but no words came. There really was no script now. The giant pulled on John next. The pain was intense, but he could only scream inside his head. He cried out for Mary Elizabeth in his thoughts. As he broke loose of his track, finally free, he mused for just a moment. His thoughts slowly faded to darkness.